Hey everyone. Today I'm going to be making a Genshin 3.2 tier list based off my experience as an AR60 player. For context, I have been playing since version 1.0 and I have seen the game evolve into what it is today. Now keep in mind that this is simply my opinion and I am not encouraging anyone to hate on a specific character. This tier list will be tailored towards what you can get out of a character, not necessarily how quickly they can clear the Spiral Abyss, but that will be factored in. So with that being said, let's get started. So starting off with Albedo, placing him in S tier. He is a very strong off-field Geo sub DPS who can provide elemental mastery for your team, which is always nice to have. Although he has split scaling between his attack and defense for his elemental skill, he is still able to dish out a lot of off-field Geo damage regardless. You can slot him in for almost any team, but he really shines in Geo teams. Next is Amber, placing her right at the bottom. Not much to say here other than she's a meme character. Amber does not provide a lot for your party. She's neither a main DPS or a sub DPS. The only good thing that she has going for her is that she's good for exploring. Other than that, not a really good character. For the Amber enthusiasts out there, more power to you. Next is Ayaka, placing her at SS tier. Ayaka has a very safe playstyle because of her alternate sprint. She can buff herself with her two passives. One of them is cryo damage bonus and the other is normal and charge attack damage bonus. If you're able to run a 4-piece Blizzard Destroyer on her in a freeze team, she will dish out tons of damage and you can't go wrong with this character. She does a lot of damage. On to Barbara. Barbara, A tier. She's a healer, everyone gets her free. Can hold Drilling Tails for your main DPS and also apply a decent amount of Hydro to monsters. Acts as a replacement for Kokomi in Nilou Bloom teams if you don't have her. Barbara is not amazing, but not bad either. So on to Beidou. Beidou, placing her in S-. She provides a pretty solid amount of utility to your team with her Elemental Burst, and if you can time her Elemental skill properly, she will do a big chunk of damage. One downside of her is that she doesn't work with Raiden Shogun, which is a little bit unfortunate, but she is still a desirable character in Taser team comps and physical damage teams. So next is Bennett, placing him at SS tier. He is a very easy character to invest into. You don't need much to get going with him. The only constellation you need is Constellation 1. Other than that, put a high base attack sword on him, 4-piece noblesse, and try to get as much energy recharge as you can. His other artifact stats don't really matter because those only increase his healing, but he has really no downsides except for maybe corrosion. Other than that, he will provide your team with huge attack boosts. On to Chongyun, or as Chinese people say, Zhongyun. Anyway, he is more of a for fun character as his cryo infusion is not widely used, and it can be good in certain setups, but I don't think every character in this game wants cryo infusion, except for maybe a few characters. So placing him in A tier, take it as it is. Next, Diluc, placing him in A tier. So I remember when Genshin first came out, everybody wanted him. He looked awesome and did crazy amounts of pyro damage, and he was a badass in the Archon quest. However, as time went on, people started to realize that he had design issues, such as his elemental burst pushing enemies from Mondstadt all the way to Inazuma, and also one of his passives not being very helpful for him because it enhances his charge attacks, which he doesn't really use in the first place. So if you use Diluc, he can still clear content just fine, he's just not amazing at it. I believe Diluc will become better in the future once more Claymore weapons are available, but as of now, he stays in A tier for me. Next, Diona, placing her in S tier. She has very good utility and increases your team's survivability with a sturdy shield. At Constellation 6, she becomes even more strong with her 200 Elemental Mastery buff, and works in almost any team, is a very reliable source of anything you want out of a support. So next, with Fischl, I'm placing her in SS tier for two reasons. One, with the addition of Dendro, she's able to trigger Quicken for aggravate or spread reactions for the team constantly, and this results in a lot more damage overall. And two, I think people sleep on the fact that you can run 4-piece tenacity on her for the team-wide buff. Most people run 18% attack and 2-piece electro damage bonus on her, but I find that this isn't the best for her, as if you run 4-piece tenacity, you'll be buffing your whole team's attack by 20%, and all you're missing out on is 15% electro damage bonus. Also, since aggravate and spread works in a way where the character adds on flat damage based on their current attack, this makes tenacity on Fischl in Dendro teams even more valuable. If you don't really care about the tenacity buff, you could run 4-piece Gildan on her, which is meant for more damage. So people who are running 2-piece attack and 2-piece electro damage bonus are missing out on either a team-wide buff or tons of more damage on Fischl. And with the addition of Dendro, she has just risen in power, placing her in SS tier. Very, very strong. Next is Ganyu, placing her in SS tier. So I have heard recently that people argue that she has fallen off because of Dendro, but I don't find this to be the case. Because just like Ayaka, she has a very safe playstyle and is able to be played in freeze teams with 4-piece Blizzard Strayer and be able to consistently crit. And if you don't play her in a freeze team, you can play her in a melt team. And there's actually a new team that came out recently which involves reverse melt Ganyu with burning reactions. You have Nahida and Bennett trigger burning, and then you're able to consistently melt with Ganyu. So in my opinion, I don't think Ganyu has fallen out of favor. She's still top tier. Next, Hu Tao. Hu Tao, SS tier. Although she has not had a rerun for longer than A's Vision of Eternity, it's safe to say that she's top tier. Especially with the double Hydro Resonance change, she gets max HP, she got indirectly buffed, her numbers are even higher than before. She's able to dish out a truckload of damage. Not much else to say here other than Hu Tao is top tier. Next, Jean, S tier. I think some people underestimate how good she can be. She's able to counter corrosion and provide Viridescent Shred for your party while also being an Anemo battery for other Anemo characters. If your team doesn't need Viridescent, you can put Noblesse on her, or 2-piece Viridescent and 2-piece 18% attack. There are lots of ways to build her. One downside she does have is that her elemental skill pushes some monsters away, which can be annoying, but overall, still a very solid support to have in your party. Next is Kaeya. Kaeya, so he can be good in certain teams such as Diluc Melt or some physical damage teams, but there are better options. He also has some selfish passive and constellation designs that would suit a main DPS, but he's not best suited to be a main DPS, which kind of lowers the value of his passives and constellations. He remains in B tier for me. Next is Keqing, placing her in S tier. So she has had a crazy ride since the game was released. Just like Diluc, she was desired by a lot of people when she first came out in the game, which was available in the first version, and people eventually realized that she had design issues as a main DPS. Pre-Dendro release, crit damage from Ascending wasn't very good on her because electro reactions were unable to crit. But with the addition of Dendro and how Aggravate works, crit works and attack also works on her, meaning that Aggravate Keqing does a ton of damage. People should be on the lookout for her because I do believe Aggravate Keqing could probably be one of the top tier damage teams in the future. I just don't know yet, but I have seen some clips of Keqings popping off with Aggravate teams, so keep a lookout. She remains in S tier for now, but could move up later. Next, Klee. Now hear me out. I believe she has fallen off harder than Diluc has. She has clunky animations, short attack range, and her elemental burst doesn't work off field. Her party support is locked behind constellations, and her one passive where she can restore energy for your party requires RNG because she needs crit, and even then it's not really that impressive. She has a hard time keeping up now because of what's available. All these new Dendro reactions, everything. She can't really work with Virgin that well because her attacks are really weird. In my experience, I'm not sure. If somebody finds a way to make Klee a little bit stronger, then please let me know, but she is really not that impressive right now. She has fallen off, placing her in B tier. On to Lisa. So keep a lookout for her as Electro has gotten stronger since Dendro was introduced. With new parties being discovered, Lisa might rise in power once again, and for now, she remains a solid Electrodendro reaction driver at A tier. She does solid amounts of damage, but we'll see what happens with new characters coming out. She can be very strong in certain setups. So next we have Mona, placing her in SS tier. And my main reason for this is because her Omen Bubble damage bonus from her Elemental Burst is just way too valuable. I feel like if you splash Mona into almost any team, she would be good in that party. So she also has a pretty safe playstyle, and she excels in freeze teams. Very, very good character to have in your party. Next, Ningguang, placing her here. So she would be a lot better if she had a tailored artifact set, but she doesn't. And she is one of 3 Geo characters that scales off of attack only for damage. Geo Traveler is the other one, and Zhongli is the other one. Now, Zhongli is an exception because he scales off HP, and I will talk about Traveler later. As for Ningguang, she doesn't really have party support either because, for example, Goro doesn't really help her, and this is what just makes her not that powerful right now. But in the future, if she gets a tailored artifact set, she will become a lot stronger. But for now, she remains in B tier for me. Next, Noelle. A tier, solid shield support and can also heal your party. Kind of counters corrosion, but you need Constellation 1 for that at least, and her Elemental Burst. Other than that, at C6, you can play her as a main DPS. She's a solid 4-star character to invest into if you want to see how well you can build her. And how you build her changes on how you want to play her, but overall, you can't go wrong with defense or shield strength on her. Solid character. Next, Qiqi. Also known as Pity Obliterator, she is not very good. She has a long elemental skill cooldown and she doesn't generate particles from it, and although she did get better with Ocean Hued Clam, there are a lot better options when it comes to cryo application and healing. Her constellations are also Omega Troll, so B tier, nothing else to say. Next, Razor. Razor is good. Unfortunately, he is not good against all the new monsters Hoyoverse is throwing at us. Physical damage is also suffering in general because it has been neglected for the longest time ever, second to Hu Tao's potential rerun. All jokes aside though, a fully invested Razor can do well, but is still gated because he's a physical damage dealer. It just hasn't been touched in a long time, and Razor just needs something in order to make him a little bit better. Maybe there will be a physical damage adjustment in the future, but for now, remains in B tier. Next is Sucrose, placing her at S-. If you ever need an Animo support without wanting to spend hundreds of copium dollars on Venti or Kazuha, then Sucrose is a perfect choice for you. Although her grouping is not as great as those two, she can provide elemental mastery for the team. And at Constellation 6, her Elemental Burst can infuse with an element, and that provides elemental damage bonus for your team based on which one you swirled. And it's very similar to Kazuha's buff. She has a very strong and versatile Animo support. Next we have Childe, placing him in S tier. Riptide is very good and it's unique to him. It allows you to clear waves of monsters really easily and it looks really cool. He excels in taser teams and vaporized teams and has risen in power with Dendro. I believe the only thing that's gating him from being top tier is the fact that his elemental skill has a really long cooldown if you don't manage it properly, so it can be a little bit hard to decide on rotations with him at times. Constellation 1 fixes this slightly and Constellation 6 completely removes this restriction, but with Constellations or without, he is a very strong character. He can dish out tons of damage. S tier. Next, Venti, placing him in S tier. So Venti was my first 5-star, and when Genshin was still in its early days, he was one of the most broken characters to ever exist when it came to exploring, because he would just group every single Hilichurl camp and just completely kill them. However, as the game evolved, shortly after Inazuma and Kazuha's release, Venti was considered quote-unquote outclassed by Kazuha. This is not entirely true, but Venti did fall in power around the 2.x patches because there were some monsters that were not pullable by his elemental burst. Some examples are Spectres and Nobushi. They were completely immune to his elemental burst. However, they fixed this in 2.8, I believe, where specters and other monsters are able to be pulled in by Anemo, so Venti indirectly got buffed, and as of now, I think he remains a solid S tier pick. He's able to group tons of monsters. If there's ever an Abyss cycle where there's a ton of monsters, he is great. He is probably better than Kazuha in those cases, but otherwise, I'm just going to leave him in S tier for now. Next is Xiangling, going right into SS tier. I don't have to say much here other than she's the polearm Archon and she makes the game too easy. She applies way too much pyro, does way too much damage. Everything about her is just insane. Xiangling, 4-piece emblem Severed Fate, put the catch on her, blow up enemies, call it a day. So up next, Xiao, placing him in S tier. So recently people have been saying that he has fallen in power. While I don't think this is entirely true, I can understand why. There have been a lot of new flying enemies that make Xiao mains lament and rage quit. As for his strength, a fully invested Xiao without constellations can excel in his Geo team with Albedo, Zhongli, and Jin. With Faruzan, and sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, I don't know how to say it, we will have to see if Xiao can benefit from her. Also, there could be a double Anemo resonance change in the future, so Xiao could go up in power. We'll just have to see. Next, Xingqiu, placing him in SS tier. He is basically Hydro Xiangling and provides survivability as well. The only downside of him is missing his elemental skill and then rage quitting. Other than that, he is overwhelmingly strong as a Hydro sub DPS. Works well with any character who normal attacks a lot, and is also Hu Tao's best friend. So next, Xinyan, placing her here, B tier. If she was Cryo or Electro, she'd be a lot better. Xinyan has just a weird design where she is split between attack and defense, and is also tailored towards physical damage. Pyro is not really an element you want in a physical damage team, and she's also a bit awkward to fit into other teams that are not physical damage. She provides decent utility, but it could be better, placing her here. Okay, next, Zhongli, SS tier. Do I really need to explain? He's a shield bot, Geo nuke bot. He has the best shield in the game, shreds resistances, and stuns enemies by petrifying them, and he can provide 4-piece tenacity buff for your whole team. Everything about him, you can fit him into any team and he would be good. SS tier, top tier, Zhongli, Geo Daddy, whatever you want to call him. So up next, Rosaria, placing her in S-. I believe Rosaria is a bit underrated. She can provide up to 15% crit rate for your team if you hit 100% crit rate on her, and since she builds crit anyway, she will be doing a good chunk of damage from her burst as well. Combining this with 4-piece Noblesse, she is able to provide solid utility for your team, as well as good cryo application. Very good with Eula in physical damage teams at Constellation 6. So next is Eula, placing her in S tier. Eula is good, and what's preventing her from being top tier is the fact that physical damage has been neglected by Hoyoverse for quite some time now, and compared to Dendro and all the new things that have come out, she is not that impressive compared to those things. She is a little bit better off than Razor because she's cryo, so she can benefit from double cryo resonance to increase her crit rate, and in the future, if cryo gets adjusted, she will shoot up in power, potentially to top tier, but as of now, remains an S tier in my opinion. So next, Yanfei, placing her in A tier. She's a solid pyro main DPS, and there are multiple ways to build her. You can put 4-piece Wanderer's Trope on her, 4-piece Crimson Witch, or even 4-piece Shimenawa. The only thing gating her is her survivability, as well as catalyst charge attacks consuming a lot of stamina. If stamina ever increases in the future, she will become a lot stronger. Next, Kazuha, SS tier. He provides grouping, elemental damage bonus, and does a large amount of damage himself. While his grouping is not as great as Venti's, his passive where he provides elemental damage bonus based on what element he swirls is so valuable that it just makes him top tier. The only downside of him is that it takes a long time to get triple elemental mastery on him for 4-piece iridescent, but once he has it, he is one of the best supports in the game. He is crazy. Next, Yae Miko, S tier. So she's a unique DPS in the sense that she gains multiplicative damage based on the level of her normal attack talent and her elemental skill. She excels at dealing with flying enemies and is amazing at single target damage. The only thing that is stopping her from being top tier in my opinion is that her elemental burst isn't really that good, and also she doesn't have a lot of area of effect damage. She is mostly tailored towards single targets, but regardless, in my opinion she is very close to being top tier. Next is Xiao, placing her in S-. So she provides a lot of healing just like Jean. However, she does need Constellation 1, otherwise her burst doesn't really work too well. And also she needs Elemental Mastery, which can be a little bit harder to get. Other than that, she's a solid healer who can provide Viridescent for the team if they need it. So next is Raiden Shogun, and I'm placing her at top tier for obvious reasons. She is a very unique character in the sense that she could be both a main DPS and sub DPS at the same time, while also regenerating energy for the team and also increasing the team's elemental burst damage. And at Constellation 2, she becomes a monster DPS. Raiden is very, very strong. So next is Kujou Sara, and I'm placing her in S tier. She is a very good electro-based buffer. Any electro character, if you want them to do more electro damage, Kujou Sara is the best way to go. Especially at C6, the electro damage increases a lot. Very strong in electro teams. So next, Kokomi, SS tier. While she was not too appreciated by release by some people, her power was eventually realized as time went on. With the addition of Dendro, she is one of the best characters to slot in any Dendro team. Provides unbelievable amounts of healing, hydro application, and does a lot of damage during her elemental burst. Obviously the downside is she can't crit, and when you get a 30% crit damage piece when you're just trying to get an HP piece up for her, it sucks. But other than that, she is amazing. So next, Aloy. Not everyone owns her, so I won't talk about her that much. I will say that I'm not really a fan of her kit design, and her damage is a little bit lackluster. She also doesn't have constellations, but she does have a pretty cool passive where you can not scare off some animals that provide meat when you kill them or something like that. Pretty cool, but other than that, Aloy, a little bit sad, but not everyone has her. I'm just going to leave her in C tier with Amber, so she has a friend. Next is Thoma, placing him in B tier. Now look, Thoma is my favorite character, but I'm not going to be biased here. He is really not that good. With the addition of Dendro and Burgeon, he can be very strong. However, it takes a long time to get triple elemental mastery on a specific set, as well as if you build him as a shield support, a dedicated shield support, the shield is not that impressive. If you build him as a sub DPS, he's not going to do that much damage. His Constellation 6 is pretty good, but other than that, he's a pretty mediocre character even if you get everything going for him, which is a little bit sad, but Thoma is the way he is. So next we have Arataki Ito, everybody's favorite Oni. So Ito is very strong, however he is similar to Eula and Razor in the sense that Geo is essentially colored physical damage. Since Geo Resonance did get a buff in the past though, as well as Goro being Ito's dedicated support, I think Ito has more going for him than Eula. When running Goro with Ito, the strength of Goro will influence how strong Ito is, and depending on if Geo does get a little bit of love in the future, Ito could be top tier. It really has to depend on what Hoyo decides to do with Geo, or if they even do anything, but we'll wait and see. Speaking of Goro, placing him in the same tier as Ito. So he is Ito's dedicated support as well as a support for any Geo team who especially likes defense. He is perfectly fine at Constellation 0 but really shines at C6 in a mono Geo team. A common misconception about Goro is placing triple defense on him, which is not really that good. In my opinion, you should put energy recharge, Geo damage bonus, and crit rate to proc Favonius Lance. Defense only increases his elemental burst damage, which doesn't do a lot in the first place, and having ER on him allows him to get his burst up a lot more often, as well as being a battery with Favonius Lance for other Geo characters. Up next is Shenhe, placing her in S tier. So a lot of people call her niche, which is somewhat true, but she's not entirely useless in a non-cryo team. Her passive can buff elemental skill and burst damage, as well as normal, charged, and plunging attack damage bonus. While she's not amazing in non-cryo teams, she's not useless. She is very good in cryo teams as she was designed to be. She is also relatively easy to build. All you need to do is stack as much attack and energy recharge on her as much as possible. She is the dedicated cryo support. So next is Yunjin, placing her in S tier. She's a dedicated normal attack buffer, really good with Yoimiya, really good with Ayato, anyone who likes to normal attack. She is also relatively easy to build as you want to stack defense and energy recharge. She gets energy recharge from ascending, which is also nice, and the only thing that is not good about her is that she's not really that useful outside of those teams, and also if you pair her with too many elements that align, then she's going to lose out on one of her passives, which increases her normal attack buff. Next, Yae Miko, S tier. So with the introduction of Dendro and 4-piece Gilded set, Yae Miko has become really strong in aggravate teams. Especially paired with Nahida, she can constantly trigger her Trikarma Purification, as well as Hyper Bloom if you have a Hydro character in your party. As of right now, Yae Miko is very strong. So next, Ayato, placing him in S tier. He is a very strong main DPS and honestly on the fence of being top tier in SS. I think that if there's a little nudge that he gets indirectly, he will be top tier. But he's very similar to Childe, able to dish out a large amount of hydro damage, and with Dendro, he could be the driver for that team for Bloom teams. If you pair him with Yunjin and Xiangling, he is very, very strong. You can't go wrong with Ayato as a main DPS. Next, Yelan. So Yelan is basically a 5-star version of Xingqiu and increases the damage of your current character when her burst is activated. She will do coordinated attacks with her dice, and those things do so much damage. It doesn't really matter what you build on her, she's going to do damage anyway, but there are a lot of ways to build her. You can build her as energy recharge with Emblem Severed Fate, or you can build her as a HP scaling character. It's really up to you. She will do a ton of damage regardless. Yelan is crazy. Next is Kuki Shinobu. So similar to other Electro characters, she was a bit mediocre before Dendro was released. What sets her apart now is that she's a healer and is able to constantly dish out Electro damage, which allows her to proc Electro Dendro related reactions, such as Hyper Bloom and Quicken, and Aggravate. She can also use 4-piece Tenacity to buff your whole team, which is always nice, and this is why she has become very strong as of recently. Next, Heizo, placing him here in S-. I have built Heizo in 2 ways. The first is full Elemental Mastery with 4-piece Viridescent, and the second is crit Heizo with 2-piece Viridescent and 18% attack. Main DPS or sub DPS, however you play him, he is pretty solid for a 4-star, pretty good. Definitely fun to play as well, but struggles to do certain combat related things such as taking down high HP targets. He is good at killing multiple enemies because he is Anemo, but other than that he really struggles against some bosses, especially in the Abyss. With Farozan's release, and sorry about butchering that if I did butcher it, with her being released soon, he will be stronger as a main DPS, and we will wait and see if he goes up in the list. Next, Tighnari. I know I'm not pronouncing that properly, but bear with me. He is a Dendro character who can better utilize crits and can still work well with things such as Bloom. A very strong Dendro character, and lots of people enjoy using him. I also like how he is able to be obtained without being in any event wish. Next, Klee, placing her in S-. She provides a lot of Dendro application while also being able to give Elemental Mastery to the team with Constellation 4. Her best artifact set is Deepwood if you want to debuff enemies to make your Dendro characters do more damage. Otherwise, she's just overall good at applying Dendro. Next, Dori, placing her in S-. Dori is an Electro battery in a unique way. Overall, I think she is best with characters who struggle to get their burst back up, but since most people use Raiden, I don't see her being used much. However, she is still a solid character who is not too hard to build. She's not amazing, but not terrible either. So next is Nilou, placing her in S tier. Solely because she's the only character that can activate bountiful cores. These bountiful cores are unique to her. She's not too hard to build, you really just need HP on her. In the future, if we get another HP set, then that will probably be really good on her because 2-piece HP, 2-piece HP, she'll be able to increase her bountiful core damage more and more. With the new artifact set coming out that increases bloom, I think that will be placed on party members and not her because she's not the one really triggering the blooms, but we'll wait and see what happens. She could go up or down in power, we'll have to wait and see. Next, Sino, S tier. I think he's very similar to Keqing on a very similar level as her with Aggravate, doing tons of damage with that type of reaction. His damage can reach very high numbers. The only thing I don't like about him is that his elemental burst costs a lot, but you can fix that with batteries or something, another teammate, such as Dory. Anyway, you poor Sino mains who had to collect those scarabs. I feel really bad for you, and I apologize. Next is Candice, placing her in S- tier. So she buffs normal attacks similar to Yunjin and can give Hydro Infusion. She also has decent elemental burst damage while being able to use Noblesse as well. However, she does have low particle generation and not everyone needs Hydro Infusion, but either way, still a solid character. You can make some pretty fun builds with her. Not bad. So next is Nahida. The introduction of Dendro and her has created new paths for older characters to shine. Some examples are Tomba Virgin, Shinobu and Miko Hyper Bloom, and Nilou Nahida Bloom. As for Nahida, she doesn't need grouping because her elemental skill connects to everybody that you connected to. She's also able to provide elemental mastery for her team. And everything about her is very easy to play, very easy to build. Does a lot of damage off field. Constellation 2 makes her a monster with Dendro based reactions. It's safe to say that Nahida is very powerful and is top tier. Next is Layla. I'm putting her at S-. Layla is a solid cryo applicator who is also good at shielding. She can provide 4-piece tenacity buff for her team, making her a solid choice when considering shield characters. She is one of the better shield characters that have been released, and one of the only 4-stars who has 100% uptime on her shield. So next for Scaramouche and Faruzan. Placing them here, I don't know yet. This is a 3.2 tier list. I do predict that Scaramouche will be pretty strong, also known as Wanderer. For Faruzan, for those who don't look at leaks, she was nerfed multiple times throughout the beta testing. People are saying she will have huge energy issues if she doesn't have constellations. We will have to wait and see what happens, but for now, just placing them in this placeholder tier. And finally, Traveler. Placing them here in A tier. So it really depends on which element you're talking about for Traveler. Anemo and Geo Traveler are useful in the early game when you're starting out in Genshin, but they become replaced later. As for Electro Traveler, they become outclassed by Raiden Shogun and even Dory for batterying your team. Not that Electro Traveler is bad, but it's more of there are better options and mostly everyone has their Traveler on Dendro anyway. Swapping between elements can be a little bit annoying. As for Dendro Traveler, the release of Nahida just made them go down in power. I'm sure a lot of people stopped using Dendro Traveler as soon as Nahida came out. Generally speaking, for the overall Traveler, placing them in A tier seems fair because they did help people clear content in the beginning of the game, and with the introduction of Dendro, people started to try out Dendro Traveler. I believe Traveler is a character people will return to every now and then, but it's never a character that they are going to keep in their parties. And there you have it. This is my tier list as of version 3.2. If you agree or disagree with me, please let me know. I'd like to hear your opinion. And keep in mind, every character is viable if you invest in them enough. Most importantly, you should use characters if you like them, regardless of how strong they are. Don't let this tier list determine who you should pull for. If you want more clarification on a specific character, let me know. Otherwise, thank you for watching.